Night Shyamalan has a brand new movie in theaters this week, so it's time to dive in and rank every single M. Night Shyamalan movie that I have seen from worst to best. Now, this list, you're going to see some of the greatest films that I've always loved, and you're going to see some of the worst films I've ever seen, but that's kind of the filmmaker that he's really much done. Sometimes he comes out with a giant hit, and sometimes it's a mixed bag, and then other times it's a piece of shit. But with that said, I love M. Night Shyamalan. I can be a defender of him at times. You're going to see some hot takes on this ranking, but I definitely want to see your guys' list down below in the comment section. Hit that like, subscribe button, comment down below, and without further ado, let's get into this list. So overall, M. Night Shyamalan does have 15 directed movies, but 2 of those I've actually never been able to see, and as well as I don't really care to see, and that is Praying with Anger and Wide Awake. Those are actually his 2 original first movies that, again, I can't find them anywhere. I just also don't really care to watch them, and I don't want to have to illegally download them to watch them. That's just stupid. So with that said, maybe one day I'll finally watch them, but at the very bottom, at the number 13, is Avatar: The Last Airbender, or really much just called The Last Airbender. This is the live-action first Avatar film we ever got that really cursed a lot of fans, and I'll be honest, I've never finished this one. I got about 30 to 40 minutes in, and at the time when this came out, I was a massive Last Airbender fan. I'm still big onto the whole Avatar world, but this was like the peak of my fan base for this. And this movie was completely boring. And as someone who was very young when this movie still came out, I knew the difference between a bad movie and a good movie. And what disappointed me was, even as a kid, I was a massive fan of M. Night Shyamalan due to The Sixth Sense, due to Unbreakable, due to Signs, and films like those. So seeing this movie very disappointed me and pissed me off as a fan. It is arguably his, I don't even know if it's arguably, it's honestly his worst film ever made. I don't know what happened here. Nothing works, and this is the lowest of lowest that you can get to. At my number 12, we have After Earth, starring Jaden Smith and Will Smith. You think a father-son story, sci-fi set adventure survival aspect could be awesome. Sadly, this is one of those boring movies that I've ever watched in my entire life. I have sat through this, and I could not tell you a single frame of this movie, because when I was watching it, I just sat there in utter awe of how boring this movie was. Again, M. Night Shyamalan's sci-fi adventure kind of seems like a cool idea, but it is completely dull from top to bottom. And I would even say Jaden Smith and Will Smith do not give a great performance in here. Again, that comes down to directing, that comes down to script. After Earth has all the middling mess that you could possibly imagine, and it is not a great film. Now at my number 11, we have The Happening. Now, a lot of people might contend that this is actually his worst movie made, but I would go as far as to say it's not that bad. I actually quite like The Happening. I think there's fun aspects to it, but what I will say is that it's the script here that really kills a lot of stuff, because it's B-level horror that M. Night Shyamalan was going for really doesn't work. And I actually think if the script was written by someone else but directed by M. Night Shyamalan, maybe this actually might work a little better. And we see this because of like Knock at the Cabin, which we'll be talking about soon, where that film was directed by him, but it wasn't fully on written by him. It was written by like 2 other people alongside him. So I think that's where The Happening really could have been elevated a bit more. It's not a terrible movie like some people think, at least for me, but I don't really ever care to go back and watch this one. I think it's kind of boring at times, but the concept itself is actually genuinely scary. And also adding in here, I hate that there is kind of a twist to this. You know, M. Night Shyamalan became the twist guy, so The Happening had to have a twist, and I don't think it needed one. At my number 10 is Old. Now, this is where we actually get to some of the stuff on the list that I do like, that I do appreciate. And Old, for me, I think, again, like The Happening, has a fascinating idea. I love this concept, and specifically, if you've ever read the graphic novel that this movie is based off of, it is delightful. Well, I guess delightful is not a great word, but it's incredible. It is an incredible graphic novel that I highly recommend, but Old takes that, brings it to life, and overall, I'm not getting into spoilers for people who haven't seen it. I wasn't a big fan of the ending. I get what he was going for. Again, it was that twist that M. Night Shyamalan had to bring about. I overall found this movie to be a little bit B-level horror once again, kind of like The Happening. And again, I think that centers down to he should not have written this script. Co-write, that's fine. But for me, it seems like his daughter was actually a second unit director on it. Sometimes I actually feel that maybe she was actually the one that directed this film at times. But there's some solid performances in here. But overall, when I look back on Old, I do like it. I do like its messaging and specifically what it has to say about family and time, because I'm a big person on how precious time is and like the time that you give to people, and specifically in family, and how like aging works. And I think I'm fascinated with that. Like, I'm a fascination with a lot of Christopher Nolan films within that aspect, and I'm also fascinated with this concept. So I do have a little bit of bias towards old, but I do understand all the complaints, to be honest. And that's where we get to my number 9, Lady in the Water. Now, full discretion, I've only seen this movie like twice, but my memories of seeing it might be clouded with a little bit of nostalgia. I think the concept for Lady in the Water is actually really, again, cool. I like the idea. I like how it's all taking place, like this magical world is all taking place in this one apartment complex pretty much. And like the thing for M. Night Shyamalan movies is when you look at every concept of his, it's like so vast and big at times, but so small scaled. And there's some appreciation to that. Now, again, I understand, again, some wonky stuff with the script, some weird choices that he decides to make, specifically in his thematics and what Lady in the Water is trying to do with its main character and all of its protagonists. But all I will say is that I think the world here is very fitting. And honestly, when I have gone back to rewatch this one, I always expect to hate it like everyone else does, but I walk away going, that was cool. That was really cool. But that's about it. Overall, just to kind of wrap this one up, I don't hate this movie, but I understand as well why people do. At my number 8 is The Visit. Now, I have a weird story for this one, and it's unique. So at the time of this movie coming out, I was not in the best frame of mind. I wasn't really keeping up with movies too much, and really I was just going to the blockbusters with my friends at that time. Sometimes to hear indie film here and there, but my love for films was there, but it was clouded by a couple other things that I'm not going to get into because it's a little bit personal. But The Visit, I went with a bunch of friends. They're like, hey, let's go see this fun new mockumentary kind of horror film. I was like, okay, let's go. Didn't watch the trailer, didn't see anything for it. Went and sat down, and the second I saw a film from M. Night Shyamalan, I went, holy shit, he's back. It was great to see that, and I became fascinated with looking into the history of this movie, because this movie was made years after his last one. He mortgaged his own house to make this, so ever since this movie's actually been self-financing every other film, whether it's Split, Glass, Old, and even Knock at the Cabin. And that takes balls to do, but it works because he gets creative freedom over it. In The Visit, if you look into it, he actually had 3 different edits of the film. One that was pure comedy, one that was pure horror, and one that was the mix, and we got the one that was the mix. I find this movie to be very enjoyable. I think it is actually quite intense and scary, but also weirdly comedic, but it works for what M. Night Shyamalan's tone is here, and I think The Visit is just a batshit crazy movie that I truly enjoy. Now, my number 7 is The Village. I've always kind of liked The Village a lot more than other people do, specifically in the twist and what it actually has to say about the modern age and certain societal territories in our world. Now, I think Joaquin Phoenix is great in here. I think Bryce Dallas Howard is absolutely incredible in here as well. I think this movie is very underrated, and I love the concept of the monsters and how, well, we're not going to go into any more than that because I don't want to ruin the twist. But I do like the twist in here. Not everyone will, but I think The Village is a clever movie that works better specifically when you know what the twist is and when you actually go back to rewatch it. And going back to rewatch it, this is one of the few films of his that I do think gets elevated from all of those elements. Leading in, we have 6 more films to talk about, and at my number 6 is Glass. Now, I just have pure nostalgia for Glass and this whole Unbreakable trilogy, and I actually really dig what M. Night Shyamalan did with this film up until like the last 20 minutes. I wasn't a huge fan of like how certain characters decided to go out and how certain storylines kind of ended here. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I think it kind of is a little bit anticlimactic, and those were the elements, for me at least, that does hold Glass from being higher up on this list. Like, to be honest, if it wasn't for that, I think Glass would be top 3 of M. Night Shyamalan's career. I honestly loved a majority of this movie, but going from there, I do like that this is the build-up. It's Glass. Samuel L. Jackson's great in here. Of course, James McAvoy's incredible, and it was great to get Bruce Willis back in here as well. Sarah Paulson's scary. There's a lot of elements with her character that I wish they would have explored a little bit more. I think that's really much it. Is Glass has so many ideas that I wish were expanded on a bit more, and as well as I wish, in a sense, he had a little bit of a bigger budget here, because a lot of the, again, ideas that he has are so big and vast, but you can't really show them at the scale that you're trying to do. So in some ways, I appreciate what he was trying to do. In other ways, I was a little bit annoyed by that. But as a semi-sequel to Unbreakable and a semi-sequel to Split, Is it the finale that I would have loved to have had? No, but it's one that I do still appreciate and one that I really did love. Even though I did love it, it's kind of one of those things, it's like when you love a family member that like you love them, but you don't fully like them in the same sense. It's kind of my feelings with Glass. I don't hate this movie, but I like it more than a lot of others. Now we get to my top 5, which is, this for me is like top tier M. Night Shyamalan. This is when we get to some of the greats in his career. And at my number 5 is Split. Now again, another funny story with this one is that there was a test screening happening in my state. I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to that. I went to that screening. They had to sign a ton of NDA shit. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm signing. I just want to see what new movie this is. And it was M. Night Shyamalan's brand new movie, Split. And we saw like a 2.5 hour, maybe almost 3 hour version. It felt like, I'm not going to get into details on that because I think there's still NDA stuff on there. But in my version, Sterling K. Brown was in the damn movie and then he wasn't in the final product. But seeing that test version, it was funny because I watched it. It didn't have Bruce Willis in it. It didn't have anything like that. So I watched it. I was like, that was cool. I liked it. There's a lot of stuff I would change and we gave our feedback. And so I never went and saw that movie opening night. Then I hear that there is a giant twist, and I'm like, what twist was in the film? And I look it up, and all I saw was Unbreakable tease. And I'm like, excuse me? So before I even knew, I hopped in my car, went and watched Split again in theaters, and it was a vastly different movie. This is the better version of any film that they could have done, and I love the way that they parallel Anya Taylor-Joy's character and James McAvoy's character. I think that is very fascinating, and specifically James McAvoy's character is one of the most interesting characters to see with the split personality and the way that he morphs in between them. It's horrifying, it's scary, and it does work, and that's what I love about Split, is that it's that superhuman ability. But then once you get to the end, it all makes sense of why this is. Specifically, if you've seen Unbreakable, you're like, wow, this guy has powers. And that's what I loved about it, was that how that twist worked out. It was such a surprise to get an Unbreakable sequel nowadays. And again, I think Split is one of the most unique films that has come out over the last few, like maybe the last 10 years. I think it's just a different kind of concept that, again, I think this is actually, when you look at an M. Night Shyamalan concept and how big they can get and maybe how sometimes that can affect them, specifically in the tone that he tries to bring about, Split was the perfectly paced movie. And honestly, I think out of the last 8 films that he's made, this is probably his best made film. My number 4 is The Sixth Sense. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, really? The Sixth Sense this low? I understand. A lot of you guys love The Sixth Sense. I'm not huge on this one, and a lot of that is because I had the twist spoiled for me before I ever even watched the movie. Now, watching the movie, I can pick apart, I can see where this is, and I still really like this movie. I think it's one of his genuinely best made movies as well. But it's just one that really didn't gravitate too much for me, and that sucks because I got that taken away from me. I think there is a lot of deeply emotional resonating things in here, and Bruce Willis gives an amazing performance, but besides that, I'm not huge on Sixth Sense, but I do appreciate how great it is as a movie. I just wish I never had that taken away from me. I think a lot of people have that instance where they've never lost that twist, and they've been able to experience it with that. But again, I'm not going to spoil it here. Now, my number 3, we're at his brand new movie, Knock at the Cabin. This movie honestly surprised me. I went into this expecting a good M. Night Shyamalan movie, and I got not just a great one, a fantastic one. And I do expect this movie to divide audience members, but this movie really worked for me on a thematical level as well as an intensity level. I'm going to say a little bit vaguer on this one because it is newer, and I do think that there is a fun little element to kind of figure out inside of this film, specifically as 4 strangers show up to a couple's cabin and pretty much says, one of you must die, and you guys must willingly choose who is to die to avert the apocalypse. That is a fascinating idea. But the whole question begs is, are these people telling the truth? Are they not? And the horrifying moments that kind of come from that is really fascinating. I came away from this movie like really taken back. And specifically, Dave Bautista's performance in here is incredible. It is hands down his best performance, and it proves right now that he is one of the, not even one of the, he is the best wrestler that is turned actor. He gives literally the best performance in this entire film. It's tightly paced. It moves fast. You never feel for a dull moment. It's just consistently going. And I loved when it puts you into that frame of mind. When you leave the movie, you do still have that question, and that idea is, what would I have done with my family? What choice would I have made? And those are hard choices to see. And there's some moments in here that bring me back to Signs, where you see the alien walking across the TV like on the newsreel. There's a couple things in here of things falling from the sky that really gave me goosebumps and really made me never want to do something ever again. Again, you will see that when you see the movie, but I was very impressed with this film. My full review can kind of give a little bit more circumstances to that one. At my number 2, it is Unbreakable. Now, for me, Unbreakable would be my number 1 if it wasn't for just like the weird, abrupt ending that this film has. I still always find that to be weird, but with that said, I love Unbreakable. This movie is perfect. This is a masterpiece. Pretty much, besides the ending. Like, literally the last 2 minutes. I don't hate it, but it could be better. Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson, first off, they are just phenomenal in this movie. M. Night Shyamalan's twist on the superhero genre really brings about some fascinating ideas specifically, and really much reminds me of some of the best comics growing up, where you really much take from the perspective of someone who does not understand superpowers. And I love that the way that Unbreakable is really able to elevate that and kind of give it its own nature. Again, M. Night Shyamalan, there's not really a twist to this movie. The twist is it's just a different take on the superhero genre before the superhero genre actually blew up. And watching this movie back after seeing so many MCU, DC films nowadays, it really is elevated, and it's even stronger than it ever was. I love this movie, and the score for here is perfection. At my number 1, it is Signs. This is my huge nostalgia-based film. This is one of my favorite films of all time, and it is my favorite M. Night Shyamalan film to date, and I don't think anything will ever surpass this, no matter if he does make a better film than this or not. First off, Joaquin Phoenix, Mel Gibson, absolutely incredible. I love the thematical level, specifically on faith-based stuff, and this alien that is pretty much messing around with them, and it's a slow alien invasion film mixed with a home invasion movie. And I love the tension building and just like the little glimmers of how he hides the alien, whether you just see the leg at that one point move, or the news television, or the lights in the sky, or just finding the signs, the crop circles. It's all very intense and gives me goosebumps just even thinking about it. In all of that, it is absolutely ramped up and builds to a ferocious and terrifying ending that really does bring about the best sense of family and the importance of it. It is a very emotional film, and it is one that I cannot understate how incredible it is. One of my favorite scenes in this doesn't even have to do with aliens. It's that Last Supper that the family has when Mel Gibson makes all their favorite meals, and it's just a giant argument, and then they hug and they cry. It works so well on a thematical level, and again, bravo to M. Night Shyamalan. But with all that said, guys, that is going to be my M. Night Shyamalan ranking. Again, of course, I am missing those first 2 movies. Feel free to include those in yours if you have watched them. But other than that, guys, thanks so much again for watching this. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, comment down below your guys' thoughts, and of course, until next time, stay classy.